find yourself wanting epic, huge sounding choirs in your songs? Do you struggle to get those choirs to work and sound good? Do you find difficulty in finding the right notes to use to get that awesome choir sound? Do you get completely lost in how you need to pan them? Or do you just have not the first clue on how to make your own choir using only your own voice to make things sound epic, huge, dramatic, and cinematic? Well, don't worry, my friend. Today I'm going to show you just exactly how I personally create some epic, huge sounding choirs. Just like this. See, I know at least a little something of what I'm talking about. Alright everybody, now that you've been a bit intrigued, I'm going to go into my session here for my last metal cover I put out a couple days ago of Hit Me Baby One More Time by Britney Spears. Yes, I did it because of Kung Fu Panda and Jack Black doing theirs with Tenacious D. Whatever, it's been on my list for a long time to do. It was just time, okay? But in this, I wanted to get that like early 2000s like polyphonic choir sound without using a plugin to kind of fake it. Like I wanted to do it using my own voice, and I feel like I did pretty well at achieving this sound. And I'm going to break down a little bit of how I do this in a couple easy steps, and hopefully send you on your way to start making your own epic, huge sounding choirs using really your own voice. Yes, it does help if you can sing a bit, so there might be a little bit of an ability challenge, but hey, if you can at least match pitch with another instrument, you can do exactly what I did here, because that's how I do it. I don't have perfect pitch. I have relative pitch, and one of the techniques that I use to make these, I'll show you here in a second, really helps me to get these awesome things locked in. Okay, so the first thing that I want to kind of showcase to you is just how I get these awesome harmonies and everything set up. And I'm going to be using my little MIDI keyboard here, and yes, this is all I use for like writing my MIDI instruments and stuff out. And I'm going to show you exactly what I do here, which is very simple. As you can see, I've got a MIDI map pulled up here, and that's for just a simple like piano sound, okay? And basically I have the bridge section of this cover pulled up here. So I figured out the chords and moved them as close as possible together so that I can have the instrumentation of my own voice be within a normal vocal range for what I can cover. So I tried to keep these notes relatively close together. So I'm using some inversions and different spread voicings of these chords just to keep them as close as possible. As you can see, the notes don't vary too far. The dynamic range between the notes isn't crazy, but it's all still different chords. But as you can see, some of these chords have the same notes in them, so that helps to translate over to make some choir parts that you can sing along with, and it just helps to fill out the sound. So we've got a lot of different chords in this song. We've got C minor, G major, E flat major, F minor, and then G major again. And then later on in the bridge, we've got an A flat and a B flat. So it's pretty simple, and as you can see how I have this broken down, I'm just playing quarter notes basically throughout the bridge here with the piano, because that's what I sing along with. Right? Not the perfect rendition, but you know how it is. As you can see how I play them here on the MIDI map here. I kept them close. And so we got this for the bridge. A flat, B flat, F minor, A flat, B flat, because that leads up to the C minor chord again to start the chorus. And basically, when I write these chords out, I try to do root, third, and fifth. And then that gives me 3 separate harmonies that I can sing along with. Because when I write out these chords, what I do is I take this bottom line of all the bottom line notes, as you can see at the bottom, and I sing that as one part. And then I do the same for the middle take points here. All the middle notes that you see, I sing that as another part. And then I do the same thing for the top. And those are my 3 different parts. You know, it can get kind of stale if you're only singing like chord tones exactly how they would be, because if I were doing this as the actual song calls for, right, C minor, start down here. Technically, then you jump up to G like this, right? And then it moves all around. And part of keeping the chords close together, like I was explaining a little bit ago, helps to give some more interesting choir parts or harmony parts that will differentiate than just sounding like you're singing the chords like a piano, right? So basically, I'll take this bottom one here, this bottom line, and we will solo that out. So I'm going to pick the top 2 lines and mute them. And in Reaper, that's Alt-M on Windows. So I selected the top 2 lines and muted them. So now I've got this bottom line soloed out, and it sounds like this. And I just sing along with that. So, oh baby, baby, I da 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 da. Oh baby, baby, I na 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 ma 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 ba da. Right, and that's just one part, and I do the rest the same way. I do the next with the middle line, and then I do the rest with the top line. And so the way that I spread those out comes down to a few different things here. And so basically the way that I break these parts down, all of these that you can see, especially at the end here with the big epic magnum opus piece at the end of the song, are all vocal parts. Those are all harmonies. But the thing is, what they are, really, the main parts are just these chunks. This extra stuff at the bottom is just a bridge added on top of the chorus because they're kind of like a dueling harmony thing for the end of the song. So the way I have it broken down, as you can see here, and I'm not the best at labeling these, but I've got vocal leads, which are usually the main melody, harmony 1, which is usually the thirds, and then I just got fifths, right? And I basically record all of these harmony parts in stereo pairs. So each part has a left and right. And what I basically do is I go through, I do the main melody as if like that first line we were talking about, and I record that twice, left and right. And then I will do an octave of that, again, as another stereo pair. So I'll either go higher, usually, sounds better in terms of a choir, or lower if I can't get that high, and record another stereo pair, left and right. And then I have 4 parts for each harmony, if that makes sense. So if we take a look at even just the bridge here that we were listening to the piano on earlier, if I take all these leads here and play them soloed out. Oh baby, baby, how was I supposed to know? And these aren't going to be perfect at all. Oh pretty baby, I shouldn't have let you go. Because I am not the greatest singer in the world, but similar to like I've talked about in some of my videos about recording your guitar parts, the more parts that you record, the kind of average of where the being in tune is kind of falls more towards the middle. So you can be a little bit out of tune when you have a lot more parts. So it helps that quite a lot. And as you could hear, those were in kind of octaves almost, all right? So the same thing for harmony 1, which is like the thirds. Oh baby, baby, how was I supposed to know? It's just octaves apart. Oh pretty baby, I shouldn't have let you go. I must confess that my loneliness is killing me now. Right? So, and then we got the fifths. You guessed it right, we got the fifths. We're going to solo those out. Oh baby, baby, how was I supposed to know? Oh pretty baby. And I want to reiterate, again, this is just 2 sets of stereo pairs per harmony. One an octave difference of the other. And even though I have these labeled a specific way, I have it vocal lead, which is the main melody, harmony 1, which is like usually thirds, quotation marks, and then fifths, quotation marks. And then I label the octaves as high, right? So it's the same thing but higher. The caveat, though, and I want you to remember this, is I'm not singing in perfect thirds. I'm not singing in perfect fifths necessarily. So the way that I have these chords spread out, because I have them kind of grouped together and they're in inversions, the vocal lines that I'm singing for each one changes up. So it's not exactly parallel thirds and parallel fifths being sung. They kind of cross over. Just because they've been pushed together and they become inversions of each other. That's part of what I was talking about earlier. That way you don't end up singing parallel thirds and parallel fifths. If you can keep the chords close together and break them into inversions, it helps you to have those individual parts different enough that you're not singing parallel harmonies, which you can do. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's not always the greatest thing. And having variance and differences in your harmony parts is going to make it sound more full and different and just good, if that makes any sense. So they're not singing just all the chord parts together. It's grouped differently by the way that I put them squished together so that they can sound good together without sounding like just parallel chords being played or parallel harmony parts. And I know that means maybe a lot of nothing to some people, but it makes a huge difference. Just try not to sing so many parallel parts. I try to keep my job when it comes to recording these things as simple as I possibly can. So doing that by squishing the chords as close together as possible and doing inversions to achieve that helps those parts to be different from being parallel, and there's at least enough variance in them to sound different, be different parts, and sound good when you link them together. It's still the chords, but they're kind of intertwined in different ways with what part is singing what tone of what chord. And again, I know that's extremely confusing, but it helps to make the job easier so that I'm not having to write a whole 4-part harmony piece out for each of these songs. It just makes my job a lot easier. I write out the chords, get them squished in. I go, okay, I got to sing this bottom line, and then I sing the bottom line. It's that simple. I don't want to go in and have to be, oh, well, this one's a parallel of this, so I got to move this way, and I got to adjust this. Keep it as simple if you possibly can. So now I'll kind of show you what they sound like all together. Right? These are just the backup vocals, not the main vocals. The main vocals are up here above in the blue here. You can see that all the stuff that I've been talking about is labeled under a folder track called backups. So all these are like backup tracks. And the blue ones up above are like the main lead melody tracks and whatnot that you hear the most of. These are just the supporting vocals, the choir. But this is what they sound like all together.
Oh, baby, baby, how was I supposed to know? Oh, pretty baby, I shouldn't have let you go. I must confess that my loneliness is killing me now. Don't you know I still believe that you will be here and give me a sign. Hit me, baby, one more time.
And that's how they sound all together, which to me sounds great. Sounds full. The parts are varied enough where they don't sound like weird parallel shifts moving, which makes things kind of sound flat and boring. They intertwine enough and have different parts sticking out at different times that they sound really good. And that's kind of the chaotic way that I record this. You can do it differently if you want, but this is just the way that I do it. Okay, so next part I want to talk about is actually the panning of how I have all these parts separated out. And I learned this trick from Devin Townsend, okay? I used to struggle with how I should pan these because mixing and mastering, I definitely do all on my own from a hodgepodge of different things I've learned from a million different things that I've watched and people that I've listened to, thrown together in the best possible way that I can try to mix. So when it comes to vocals like this, where I've got a big choir sound that I'm trying to achieve, I like it to be as spread as possible. Devin Townsend, one of the greatest vocalists in metal music ever, and how he can record huge walls of sounds of just his voice, I'm going to take his word for it and kind of follow what he says, which is basically the center 20-100 rule. Now you might ask, what's the center 20-100 rule? Basically, what it says is your main melody line, you have your center, right? Your lead vocal, be center. And then your first set of backup vocals will be panned at 20% left and right. And then after that, your other backups will be 100% left and right. And he basically says that's the majority core of how he gets his stuff to spread and sound really good. So essentially, that's what I follow with a bit of variance when I get massive numbers of vocals like this. I change them by like 5%, maybe 10% to give them their own space in the stereo field. So as you can see, if we pull up the main vocals of this whole track, the main vocal lead is a center. And then I've got it panned 20% left for the first backup, and then 20% right for the next one. and then 100 for the next third one, and 100 for the, well, 99, I guess. But it's supposed to be 100 for the other. And then I have a double of all of those for different parts that I was recording here that are slightly different. So I have another center, but then here I've got it panned 25%, 25%, and then 95% and 95%, just to give them their own slot in the mix so that they're not completely clashing and sounding like really unbalanced. So I followed the same thing for the backup harmonies here. I just don't have a center in the backups too much because I don't want to mask the main melody, the main lead part. So these, I have a 10% and a 10%, 10, 10, because those are the pairs of the octaves. And then you go down below those and you've got a 30%, which again is a 5% difference from what I did here. I went up by 5% basically. 30, 30. I'm guessing 30, 30 again. So these are 30%. We went from 20% pan for the second harmony to 25 to 30. And then these next ones here are going to be 80% because I went in more. So again, slightly different, 80, 80, 80. And basically, just doing that gave them all enough room to fit and gel together well because I have so many parts for this song. So again, I'll kind of recap because that can be kind of confusing. The main lead parts that I have here are, I have my center for my main vocal, and then I've got two pairs panned 20% left and right, 100% left and right. And then I've got a double for when I want to really emphasize things, and usually it's like rougher vocals, like more like a screamy type stuff, like this.
That my loneliness is killing me now. Don't you know I still believe?
Right, the rougher stuff that I kind of lay underneath. Those are panned slightly differently at 25%, 25%, and 95 and 95. And that's for like the main lead part here. And then the backups are just panned slightly differently again, kind of following the same general idea as Devin Townsend, right? And so these went from to 10%, 30%, and 80%. And that gives them enough room. So we've got vocals at center, we've got vocals at 10%, 20%, 25%, 30%, 80%, 90%, 95%, and 100%. So we have vocals that are spread out without being too centered, and that's how you get the great sound. And that sounds very confusing to even me right now, the way I'm explaining it. That's the best way that I can explain it, so I hope you understand what I'm saying. But 100%, this is the best way that I have found to get wide, thick, rich-sounding vocal parts that are like big harmony choir things, gospel choirs, whatever you want to call it. This is the best way that I've found to pan them all out. And when you add more harmonies to that, just spread them slightly differently away from the 20 and 100% and center. Pan them slightly differently away. So instead of 20%, maybe 25. Instead of 100, 95. Instead of center, 10%. That way they spread out enough, they all have their own slot, and then they can just sound huge and awesome for you in the most confusing way that I could possibly explain it. Yeah. Now, the last thing that I want to talk about is actually how I didn't do something that I normally do when I record a large amount of vocals. So typically when I'm doing a whole bunch of different harmonies and vocal parts to give like a choir sound, I will change up my voice on each of the harmonies to sound like a different person, essentially doing impressions of like random people, just to give it some variance to sound like it's an actual choir of different people and not just a bunch of me, if that makes sense. So like playing in your nose so you sound nasally, or like doing some other kind of voice, or like, oh yeah, it's a voice like this, sounding like Rocky, you know, like just, it sounds stupid. And you're going to feel stupid singing these harmony parts isolated, just trust me. But doing that gives you a wide variance and helps to give you a more realistic choir sound that sounds like a bunch of different people, as opposed to just you singing a bunch of harmonies. I did not do that with this song, and I'll explain why. So, with this early 2000s sound, like Backstreet Boys, Britney Spears, like R&B, hip-hop, pop type stuff, it had a lot of polyphonic sounding vocals. So that's what I was shooting for. Polyphonic, which is an interesting thing. You can look it up. Basically just means a bunch of like harmonies stacked on top of each other. And there's polyphonic plugins you can get for your voice that can achieve something similar to this with you just singing one time, but I didn't want to go that route, like I said earlier in the video. But I wanted to get that polyphonic sound. So instead of singing like a bunch of different people, I just sang as myself for all the harmonies, because then that somehow just achieves that sound more. I don't know how to explain it, but it works. Again, I don't know how to explain it other than when you use a polyphonic machine or a plugin that does a polyphonic effect on your voice, it's just taking your voice that you're singing and creating those harmonies out of your voice. So maybe like that idea of being polyphonic is embedded as being one person singing a whole bunch of harmonies, and maybe that's why it works. Otherwise, I have no clue. Don't ask me. It works. I was experimenting when I was recording this with both techniques, and this is the technique that sounded the best to me on how to do this. So all of the harmony parts put together just sound like a massive crowd of me, and that's the sound I was going for. So the final thing that I'll mention, talking on this whole idea of polyphonic versus not polyphonic sound, the other way that I achieved this was in terms of how I had the faders set for these choir parts. Normally, I cascade my harmonies, which basically means that the same way that I pan them out as I do each new harmony, I pan out further and further from center. It's kind of the same thing that each harmony that I do, I lower in volume slightly from the last. So like I'll have the main center, and then the 20% will be a little bit lower in volume than the center, and then the 100% will be even lower than the 20% were. And that just helps to kind of create a space and help them blend well. And again, contrary to me saying that, I did not do that for this because I was specifically trying to get that polyphonic sound. So I kept the relative volume of all of them pretty much the same. I just kind of moved them as groups versus the main vocal and the choir vocals. I changed the volume of the groups like this throughout the song, as opposed to just changing them all individually, which would have been a pain in the ass, if I'm going to be honest, with this song here. But I didn't do the cascading volume, which is something I normally do. So experiment with that. Try it yourself and let me know which one you like better, because they both give a different effect. This, I was definitely going for a in-your-face, rich, like, polyphonic sound. Normally, in my other music, I will cascade the volume and the panning so that they blend well and create, like, a space, and it's not so polyphonic sounding. And I'll do different voices and all that fun stuff just to make it sound like a choir of people that aren't just me. So you throw all of this confusing information all together and you get something like this. And you've got a choir. Okay, I apologize if this was a lot of information thrown at you in a very confusing way. If you need more clarification, let me know down in the comments. I can do further videos and dive more in depth on how I do this, but I was trying to summate a lot of information down into something pretty simple, just to give the idea of what I did here, because I thought it was pretty cool. Cool enough that I left a isolated vocal part at the end of the song that faded away, just because I wanted to show off the vocal parts that I recorded for the song and to give it something different from the original and make it my own. But yeah, let me know if you need more clarification on anything specific, and I can definitely make further videos on this. I know this was probably extremely confusing. But otherwise, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to click and watch all the videos on your screen right now, and I will see you in the next video.